Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the pre-bid webinar for technology-based recording and conferencing products and services. We'll give everybody a couple of minutes here to log in before we get started. Again, good morning, everybody. We're giving people a few minutes here to log in, and we will start shortly. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. And once again, good morning, everybody. This is the Vendor Pre-Proposal Conference for Technology-Based Recording and Conferencing Products and Services, request for offer number DIR-CPO-TMP-559, presented Wednesday, September 1st at 10 a.m. We are glad you could join us this morning. Before we get started, we want to cover a couple of housekeeping items for you to be aware of today during our webinar. So if you can go to the next slide, Teresa. So you can change your audio by switching between computer audio and the phone call, and that's in your audio settings. I want to remind everybody that the attendees are muted today. We invite you to put your questions and answers in the question and answer panel. And let's do a quick audio check. If you can hear us pretty clear this morning, would you please raise your hand? And so we can do a quick sound check. Excellent, good, see a lot of hands going up. Thank you very much. Again, a reminder to put your questions in the Q&A. We do have a hard stop today at 12 o'clock noon. So if we will address as many questions as we possibly can at the end of our webinar. If we don't get to them today, they will be addressed after the webinar. So, and a reminder that a handout will be made available in an addendum for this pre-bid solicitation. So if you go to the next slide, we'll do a quick introduction of who your speakers and presenters are today. With DIR is Stephanie Harrison. She's the manager of statewide procurements. You will hear from Lynn Hoddy, director of Hub Outreach and Training, along with Teresa Williamson, who is Hub coordinator. She is engineering our webinar today, so thank you, Teresa. Colleen Berkeley is our Director of Procurement Services here at DIR. Elizabeth Cooper is with us, and she is our Director of Technology Planning, Policy, and Governance. And Doug Leach will take the lead in today's presentation as the procurement lead with DIR. So with that, we once again want to welcome you. Again, a reminder, put your questions in the Q&A panel. We will address them at the end of the webinar, and we will get to as many as we can because we do have a 12 o'clock hard stop today. So with that, I will turn it over to Doug Leach.
Thank you. This is Doug Leach. I will be the procurement lead for this RFO. I wanted to thank everybody for attending this morning. We're going to go over the agenda for this RFO and what the submission and evaluation and award guidelines are going to look like. So for this RFO, DIR-CPO-TMP-559. We're going to discuss the overview, the RFO contents, the RFO scope, the evaluation criteria, the term of the contracts we hope to award from this, the RFO schedule, the Hub subcontracting plan, the itemized price sheet, as well as the accessibility portion of the RFO. We'll cover the general information of it, as well as our bid stamp vendor information system portal. And that's going to be the portal where respondents are to submit their proposals to this. We'll also discuss the mandatory submission guidelines. We'll take a quick break and then we'll open it up for questions at the end. But as previously mentioned, if any question does not get answered by the 12 o'clock close, it will all be addressed through an addendum and posted on the ESPD shortly after this. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this RFO is to solicit responses from potential vendors to provide technology-based recording conferencing equipment products, software, software as a service, and related services to the state of Texas, acting by and through the Department of Information Resources. This is a rebid of a formerly titled RFO Technology-Based Recording Equipment, Software, Conferencing Products, and Related Services. At that time that was originally rebid, obviously we've endured the COVID pandemic, so we're hoping and expecting to get a lot more responses on this one and real interested to see what comes in from this. We're hoping to make and plan to make multiple awards from this RFO. Next slide. This slide just covers some general overview as far as DIR's historical sales, as well as the previous sales made on the original RFO. Total so far has been, over the last 3 fiscal years, has been $19,201,304. And as I said, we're expecting quite a bit more off of this RFO just due to the pandemic and how the whole environment has moved over the past year and a half. So next slide, please. The RFO contains attachments 1 through 5, which are reference documents, and exhibits A through K, which are mandatory response documents. Attachment 1 is the sample contract for products and services. This is what DIR uses as a standard basis for our contracts in the co-op department. Appendix 2 is the standard terms and conditions for our co-op contracts. And Appendix 3 is our service agreement. Appendix 4 is the master lease agreement. And attachments 2, 3, 4, and 5. Attachment 5 is the master operating lease agreement. The last attachments 3, 4, and 5 are standard templates that are applicable to specific services that are to be proposed. Exhibit A is the respondent information form. That's where the vendor will put in their information. Exhibit B is a respondent experience. Exhibit C is the contract marketing support plan. Exhibit D is the HSP sample form. Exhibit E is the respondent release of liability for reference. Exhibit F is the VADZIR questionnaire for non-commercial off-the-shelf products. Next slide, please. Exhibit G is the PDAA documentation for vendor accessibility and policy assessment. Exhibit H is the itemized price sheet. Exhibit I is the EDGAR certification form. Exhibit J is the VPAT documentation, and Exhibit K is the vendor references. And I've already been made aware of a typo on the vendor references that is currently being addressed through an addendum regarding the submission deadline. I wanted to let everybody know that the vendor references will be due at the same day as the closing of this RFO on September 28th. And as I previously mentioned, all the exhibits are mandatory response documents that must be included with your proposal. Next slide, please. So we will discuss the overview of this RFO. So next slide. So this is request for offer DIR-CPO-TMP-559. Later detail, we'll go over the bid stamp vendor information portal. This is where vendors are to submit their proposals to this RFO. We'll discuss the scope, the pricing, as well as the submission requirements. We'll go over the evaluation, negotiations, and award process. And then we'll explain all of the exhibits in a little further detail throughout this presentation. Next slide, please. And again, these are just the exhibits to be included with your response. And all of these slides will be made available on the ESBD in the next few days through an addendum as well. So anything that you have questions on will be addressed on the ESBD with these slides. Next slide, please. So the term of contract that we are awarding from this RFO shall be for 2 years, commencing on the last date of approval by DIR and vendor. Any contract awarded will renew automatically in one optional 2-year renewal and one optional 1-year renewal under the same terms and conditions, unless either party provides notice to the other party 60 days in advance of the renewal, stating that the party wishes to discuss modification of terms or not to renew. Next slide. The RFO schedule, which is also available on the RFO document, the RFO was posted on 8/17 to the ESBD. Today, September 1st, is the pre-proposal vendor webinar. You will have 1 week to submit all your questions. The deadline for the questions is September 8th. And then I plan to get the Q&A document posted to the ESPD as a separate addendum a few days shortly thereafter. And the deadline for submitting all proposals, as well as previously mentioned, the vendor references, is September 28th at 2 o'clock Central Standard Time. Following the closing, we will begin evaluation of responses and then go into negotiations, hopefully pretty quickly after the closing of this RFO. Next slide, please. So section 4.1 of the RFO details the evaluation of responses. Just want to remind everybody, incomplete response packages will be rejected on the spot. The financial review and HSP review are on a pass-fail basis. Failure for vendor to provide a DUNS number may result in your response being disqualified, and only responses that receive the passing grade will proceed to the next phase in evaluation. Section 4.2 is the evaluation criteria. The products and services, which is going to be your Exhibit H, itemized pricing response, is going to make up the bulk of our evaluation weight at 45%. The vendor's contract, marketing, and support plan, which details how the vendor plans to promote and support their contract if awarded, is going to make up 35% of the weight. And then the vendor's history and experience in providing the requested and proposed items and services will make up 20% of the evaluation criteria. Next slide, please. So all of the mandatory response documents, exhibits A through K, will be discussed here. Exhibit A is the vendor information form. This form must be filled out in its entirety and signed by an officer or agent empowered to contractually bind the respondent. Complete canceled contract references if applicable. Exhibit B is going to be the vendor history and experience form. Respondent must provide a detailed response to each question detailing the vendor's history and experience and providing the products and services proposed. Exhibit C is the contract marketing and support plan. Respondent must provide a plan that describes the respondent's vendor's ability and strategy for promoting and supporting the contract if awarded. Exhibits A through C are going to be the weighted scale portion of the evaluation. The other exhibits will be on a pass-fail scale. There's a detailed, exhibit A through B and C will be scaled accordingly as previously stated. Next slide, please. Exhibit D is the hub subcontracting sample form. All respondents, including those with hub designation and those that do not plan to use subcontractors, must submit an HSP. We'll cover the HSP in a little more detail further on in this webinar. Exhibit E is a respondent release of liability for references. This form is required for all canceled contracts and must be provided to DIR with respondent's proposal. Exhibit F is the VADZIR questionnaire. Respondent must provide a completed vendor accessibility development services information request, which documents respondent's capability or ability to produce accessible electronic and information resources. Next slide, please. The Exhibit G is the policy-driven adoption for accessibility for vendor self-assessment, and this must be completed in part of your proposal. Exhibit H is your itemized price sheet. It's a Excel spreadsheet. The respondent must submit specific pricing for products and services requested. Respondent must respond as instructed in Exhibit A, itemized price sheet. It's a 3-tab price sheet, and on the first tab, there's instructions on how to complete and respond. The Exhibit I is the EDGAR certification form, and this form must be completed as per section 3.5.2 of the RFO, which is a federal requirement of this RFO. Exhibit K is the vendor references. Respondents must send the reference form to a minimum of 3 companies or government agencies. References must respond to DIR on the form provided by the due date in order to be considered for evaluation. The respondent may not submit the reference form to DIR themselves. Next slide, please. Section 2 of the RFO is the scope, and on the scope, DIR intends to contract with qualified vendors to provide technology-based recording and conferencing products and services to create a contract vehicle that satisfies statewide procurement requirements for technology-based recording and conferencing products and services and improves the efficiency of the procurement process by shortening the time required to procure the specified products and services. Technology-based recording and conferencing equipment, products, software as service, and related services are used for digitally recording, hosting, playing back, annotating, closed captioning, searching, indexing, archiving, storing, and managing recordings, including but not limited to recordings of court proceedings, depositions, administrative hearings, law enforcement activities, K through 12 educational activities, professional and personal meetings, and other collaborative environments. Technology-based recordings and conferencing products and services include, but is not limited to, audio, video, web, and collaboration conferencing equipment and related services such as installation, warranty, maintenance, and support, etc., as well as conferencing software and software as a service solutions. Next slide, please. This RFO is also open for related services. Related services are any value-added service the vendor may perform as related to the products proposed. Related services include, but are not limited to, product and/or operating system image installation, deployment to customer location, maintenance and technical support, project management, managed services, and product training. I just want to remind everybody, because we've already received a lot of questions on this, this RFO is not for telecommunications services that support audio and video conferencing. Those services will be procured under a separate RFO. This RFO is for products only and the related services used to support those products. Teleconferencing solutions that are part of network or integrated turnkey communication solutions are considered telecommunication services and shall not be included in the offerings for this RFO. Next slide, please. And now I'll hand it over to Lynn and Teresa to discuss the hub subcontracting.
Okay, great. Thanks, Doug. Next slide. So for all of you that are going to respond to this RFO, it is a requirement that you complete a hub subcontracting plan and sign and date that and submit that with your response. There is a link included in the posted RFO documents that take you to that hub subcontracting plan. It's the comptroller's form, the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts statewide hub program. It is their form. All agencies are required to use it, so we link you to their page. You will use that form to complete and include in your response to this RFO. Next slide. So if you fail to complete a hub subcontracting plan, this will result in your response being rejected. The HSP is a pass-fail item. So it's required by all respondents. Yes, even if you're hub certified, you must complete this form. Yes, even if you're going to self-perform, you must complete this form. Yes, even if you don't believe in subcontractors or the hub program, you must complete this form. There are 3 different ways that you can complete the hub subcontracting plan. One of those is to subcontract and meet the hub goal. Another is to subcontract and not meet the hub goal. And then the third way is to self-perform. Next slide. So if you are intending on subcontracting and using only hubs or meeting the hub goal of 21.1%, you will complete sections 1, 2, 4, and then method A, attachment A. And in doing so, make sure you include all of the names of all of your subcontractors, all of their VID numbers. And for those of you who don't know what a VID number is, that is the federal EIN number that is issued to those companies by the IRS. So you want to make sure you include those numbers on that form. You'll want to make sure you include dollar amounts and percentages. I understand that these contracts are based on a quantity of one. We're unsure of what your sales volumes are going to be. However, y'all are putting together a marketing plan. Y'all have internal sales goals. So you're going to want to wrap those dollar amounts and percentages around what your own internal goals are. We are looking at the percentages more heavily than we actually look at those dollar amounts, because again, those dollar amounts are all going to be dependent upon your sales volume. But the percentages should be closer to what your actual utilization will be of those subcontractors. Make sure your math does add. 2 + 2 is 4. Next slide. If you're going to be subcontracting, but are not going to be meeting that hub goal of 21.1%, you will complete sections 1, 2, 4, and then method B, attachment B. And method B, attachment B, you're going to be required to solicit a minimum of 3 hub certified firms and 2 minority trade organizations. And you must allow them 7 working days to respond to your request. And this has to be 7 working days in advance of the due date of this RFO. Failure to give them 7 working days to respond to you prior to the due date of this RFO will result in your HSP being rejected. You need to maintain documentation on how you contacted the 3 hubs and the 2 minority trade organizations. If you're emailing them, keep a copy of those emails, because we can and do come back and request that information. If you want to submit those just as an attachment to your HSP, when you submit that in your response, you can do so. But there is some additional work when completing this method B, attachment B form. So you'll have to find those 3 hubs that you'll need to solicit. You'll have to find those 2 minority trade organizations. The links to where you can find them are included on the form. If you need help, you can reach out to our office. Next slide. So if you're not going to be subcontracting, you will be self-performing or self-fulfilling this contract. So you'll complete sections 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the hub subcontracting plan. And in section 3, you're going to be telling us how you will be self-performing with your own resources and equipment and etc. You're going to tell us how you can self-fulfill and support this contract on your own with the resources that you have on hand. Don't make any false promises about if we're awarded this contract, we will look into subcontracting. Don't tell me that you support the hub program. That is not what this section is for. This section is for you to tell me and communicate to me how you plan on self-fulfilling this contract. And then don't refer to any other sections in your proposals or response for us to go and look at how you intend on supporting this contract, because we do not have access to those documents. We do not see those documents. So keep that in mind. Next section or next slide. So we offer a complimentary review of your HSP for you prior to the due date of this RFO. So we can take a look at your HSP and tell you, yes, it's completed correctly, or no, it is not. We ask that you give us at least 7 working days prior to the due date of this RFO for us to take a look at that and get back to you. Keep in mind, we have numerous RFOs open. We have numerous contracts that are updating their HSPs as well. So we have a lot going on. So the more time you can give us, the more time we're going to have to look at that and give you a response, and you will have built-in time to make any corrections if you need to do so. Take us up on this offer, because if your response is rejected because of your HSP failing, you know, that you could have had that issue resolved prior to the due date of this RFO. So you can reach out to myself, or you can submit that request to the DIR Hub email box, and we've included that contact information here for you. So take us up on that offer, because we are here and we are a resource for you. We will not discuss anything else other than if your HSP has been completed correctly or not, or if you need help finding hubs and identifying the CMBL or identifying those minority trade organizations, we can assist you with that as well. Next slide. And I'll turn it back over to Doug.
All right, thank you very much. We'll go through the Exhibit H, the itemized price sheet now. And this is the products and services pricing that are going to be part of your proposal. Exhibit H contains 3 tabs. The first one is the instructions tab. That'll detail what you need to do in order to complete the form properly, as well as get it submitted properly. Tab 2 is the brand product detail tab, and this is where you'll list your products and services, as well as the pricing and descriptions of those, as well as MSRP and the discount off of the MSRP that you're proposing. And then tab 3 is the volume discounts tab that is applicable only if you're offering volume discounts with your prices that are going to be deeper than the already proposed discount off of MSRP. So you enter your prices for each item your company would like to offer to DIR customers within the applicable tabs. But mostly that'll be tab 2, the brand product detail tab. For certain products, such as commercial off the shelf and those with user interfaces, VPAT and ACR accessibility documents must also be included with the respondent's proposal and as part of your itemized price sheet. Next slide, please. So the elements required for product pricing, which is going to be the brand product detail, tab 2, is going to be the brand name, category or subcategory, the functional product description, the part number, the MSRP or list price, and the discount being offered, as well as the DIR customer price. There's already formulas loaded into that tab that should help you get to the DIR discount price being offered, as well as the formulas listed there at the bottom of that slide. So next slide, please. Elements required for services pricing, name of the service being offered, details and description of the service, the list cost, the unit of measure, the discount being offered to DIR customers, and then the DIR customer price. And there's that formula again at the bottom. Next slide, please. So attachments 1 and 2 are going to be the most important attachments of this RFO. Attachment 1 is the sample contract, and then attachment 2 is the DIR standard terms and conditions, and these are the basis of our co-op contracts. So you can go on to the next slide, please. As mentioned, that's the sample contract and the standard terms and conditions. No exceptions may be taken to certain terms as indicated on the standard terms and conditions, and those will be indicated on that Appendix A. Respondents should note the respondent's response may be disqualified if their exceptions are excessive or if they list exceptions to non-negotiable terms. And as part of the evaluation, if you do receive a passing score in the evaluation process, the less exceptions also makes it quicker to evaluate as well as get to negotiations. Any exception must be listed in Exhibit A, question 11. So if you do not list your exception in your Exhibit A proposal response, you cannot take that exception and DIR will not consider it if you try to bring it up in the negotiation process. It must be indicated in your original response. Next slide, please. And now we'll hand it over to Elizabeth to discuss the accessibility portion of the RFO.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay? I didn't have my speaker right in front of my mouth, but now I do. The statewide electronic and information resources accessibility program falls into my area of responsibility. You may hear me refer to it as EIR accessibility, and I'll be covering exhibits F, G, and J. Next slide, please. So let's start with a little bit of background because I think it provides really good context for why we ask for this information. The Texas Government Code requires state agencies and publicly funded institutions of higher education to comply with EIR accessibility standards. The purpose is for the public and state employees to be able to have access to government information and services, employees to be able to do their government jobs regardless of ability or disability. The requirements are defined in the Texas Administrative Code, and they conform to the World Wide Web Consortium 2.0 AA technical standards. So DIR customers that are state agencies or higher ed, they're going to be looking for accessible products when they buy off of DIR contracts. There are some groups that buy off of DIR contracts that are not required to comply, but state agencies and higher eds are. And so they're going to be looking for accessible products and the accessibility documentation. So we ask you to provide it so that we have some level of confidence that there are contracts out there that when our customers buy off them have appropriate accessibility documentation. Next slide, please. So depending on your offerings, you may be required to provide 3 types of documents. Accessibility conformance reports. This is what is produced with a voluntary accessibility template, a VPAT. And so a lot of people will talk about providing the VPAT. You're actually providing the accessibility conformance reports, and they're required for all commercial off-the-shelf offerings, including software as a service. For development services, we ask for a vendor accessibility information request, and I'll go into a little more detail on all of these. For all responses, we require a policy-driven adoption of accessibility, a self-assessment. And this is a tool that really helps your organization gauge your maturity related to accessibility. So that's required for all responses. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with Exhibit J first. So the VPAT, and I'm going to call it the VPAT, is used to create the accessibility conformance report. So these accessibility conformance reports must have been created using the VPAT version 2.3. And if you have an ACR that was created with a VPAT for on an older version, that might be okay as long as there have been no updates or new releases to the product since January of 2019. So you need to check and make sure that there have been no updates to those products. DIR highly recommends you look at this sooner rather than later and begin, sending requests to manufacturers for these in order to meet the deadline. If you are a reseller, get the VPAT from the manufacturer. It might be on their website. You may have to request it from them. If the manufacturer is responsible for making sure it's current and completed by a person who really understands the product and the accessibility features, and it should be based on testing. You can include PDFs in the price sheet, or you can include them in a Word document, or you can include them individually, just as long as if they are applicable, that you provide them. If a VPAT is not applicable to any of the products or services that you are offering, then please state that in the notes section of the template that we're providing for the VPAT. There's a note section after you get past the instructions, and you can just, put a note there and explain why. And that way we won't spend a lot of time looking for something when you believe it's not applicable. For non-COTS development services, as listed on this slide, we are looking for you to complete the vendor accessibility development services information request. And so really this is just a thorough description of the accessibility activities, training, tools, corrective action, if there's alternate methods that a person with a disability might be able to use for a product that's not accessible. An example is a call line for assistance. That should be put in there, and any links to websites with examples of how accessibility is being addressed, or accessible websites. If a VADSER is not applicable to your offerings, go ahead and make a note in that form as well, because it helps us expedite the review. And then finally, the final piece is the policy-driven adoption for accessibility. This is a maturity model, and the questionnaire really helps just gauge your maturity in the area of accessibility. It's an indicator to the extent that you've implemented best practices, policies into all phases of the product life cycle. And it's questions like, do you have policies or accessibility plans that you're going to implement or have been implemented? Are there governance systems in place? Are you developing one? Are you integrating accessibility into key business processes? So this generates a maturity score, and it gives you a roadmap for improving accessibility in your organization. What we're looking for is a complete, credible PDAA. So you want somebody who is familiar with the policies and processes in place to complete it. And if your organization doesn't have a high level of maturity, that's okay. We know to develop strong accessibility policies, it takes time. But what we're really looking for is that kind of honest assessment. And you can put comments that kind of explain your current state and make notes about plans for improvement. So you have all three of the templates in your bid package. And we encourage you to use those, but the VPATs, if you're a reseller, go get them from the manufacturer. And there's additional resources available here. We are launching our new website. And so if any of these do not work, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll make sure that you have appropriate links and are able to access information on EIR accessibility. That's all.
Elizabeth, just a quick a note here. We're still on the VPAT slide. Did we need to advance some slides as you were speaking?
I am so sorry that I ran through them and I did not see that y'all were not advancing them because I was looking at my notes. Do you want me to just go back through them, or are we okay?
Doug, what are your thoughts?
No, I think we're good. These slides will be made available on the ESPD. So as long as you discussed it, no, I think we're good. And the attendees can access these slides in the next couple of days on the ESPD and go over them. So I think we're good.
Okay.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
My apologies.
No worries. Great job. Thank you. Stephanie, would you like to take over the general information and bid submittal process?
Sure. Next slide, please. We'll go over some general information about the RFO. When you reference the RFO and page number when submitting questions, that will help us find exactly what you're talking about, so we can address that question appropriately. The webinar participants can submit the questions electronically anytime through the Q&A portal on the webinar. I believe the chat function is disabled, so any questions that come in through that Q&A tab will be, we will address as many of those as possible before noon today. Remember that any questions answered today are unofficial until they're posted on the ESBD in the form of an addendum, and you need to check the ESBD Electronic State Business Daily often for updates. All questions regarding this RFO must be submitted in writing through the Bidstamp vendor information portal. If you submit it through the Q&A today, you don't have to go and also submit it through the VIS portal, but any questions that you do not submit today through the Q&A tab would need to be submitted through the vendor information system portal no later than September 8th at 5 p.m. Central Time. Next slide, please. So some things that you're going to need to be aware of is there's ways that your proposal can be disqualified. And we want everybody's proposal to be considered. So please ensure that you pay particular attention to all the instructions and have done everything that the forms have asked for you to do. So ways to get the proposal disqualified are a failure to sign the vendor information form, which is the Exhibit A. That form does ask for a signature by somebody who is legally authorized to bind the vendor into a contract with DIR. And it's just a verification that everything that you all have submitted is true and accurate. Failure to complete the financial information or the DUNS number may disqualify your proposal. Failure to complete a historically underutilized business subcontracting plan. Lynn went over all of that, and everybody must complete and submit a HUB subcontracting plan, and that does need to be signed. Failure to submit on or before the due date and time. So the vendor information system portal, which we'll go over in just a few slides, has a time cutoff, and the time is going to be 2 p.m. on the due date, Central Time. At 2:01, the response is late, and the portal will not let you submit at 2:01, even if you're in progress. So you need to be aware of that. This next one is a disqualification if you are in contact with DIR employees regarding this RFO, other than the designated contacts, and we'll reiterate that in a few moments. Any vendor responding to this RFO must submit the response through the bid stamp VIS, and we'll show you how to do that in just a few slides. Next slide, please. So any vendor and all vendor representatives shall not attempt to discuss the contents of this RFO with any employees or representatives of DIR other than the designated contacts. Failure to observe this restriction may result in disqualification of any related response. This includes if you have a current contract and you have a contract manager, you can talk to them about the contract that you have an active relationship with, but you cannot talk to them about this particular RFO that does make you ineligible to move forward in the process. Same thing with any other DIR employee other than the designated contacts listed in the RFO, or if that procurement lead refers you to a designated contact. Those are the only people you're allowed to talk to about this RFO. Anybody outside of that, and it's a disqualification, and that's to keep things fair so we don't get vendors trying to get information that everybody does not have privy to. So if you have a question related to that, you can direct that to Doug. He's your designated point of contact for this RFO. His information is in the RFO, it's on the website. He's pretty easy to get a hold of. So that is your designated point of contact. Next slide, please. Here are your contacts. Doug Leach is the procurement lead. He is your first point of contact for anything related to this RFO. Anything related to the vendor portal, you can send to myself, Stephanie Harrison, and I can assist with those. If you're having problems with the vendor portal, you can't get your login to work, we will work with you to get that updated. And for the HUB subcontracting plan, Lynn Hottie through the dir.hub@dir.texas.gov. And those are questions only for the HUB subcontracting plan that you intend to submit with this proposal. Next slide, please. Okay, so bid submittal. Any vendor responding to this RFO must submit the response to the bid stamp vendor information system. Before you can access bid stamp, you must get a login and credentials to do so. This webinar will not walk you through how to get the login and credentials. We're going to talk about how you actually load your response into bid stamp. There is a different link on the DIR website that will show you how to set up your portal, your login and credentials for that. It is a manual approval process on the back end. So when you when you submit the information, it takes about 2 business days for that to get approved. Somebody's actually going in on our IT side and approving that account. So do not wait until the last minute to go in and set up your vendor account through BidStamp. You will not have enough time to get it activated and to get your documents loaded and everything submitted. If you've already have a Bitstamp account, it's the same login and credentials, meaning that if you've already set one up before for another RFO, it's the same login credentials for that. Next slide, please. If you're a person with disabilities who seeks an accommodation under the ADA for responding to the solicitation, please contact the DIR point of contact in section 3.1 and allow at least 5 business days for response. If for some reason you're not able to use the Bitstamp portal due to an ADA accommodation, we will work with you to get your proposal in, but you must request that through Doug and give him time to review it and respond to that. Next slide, please. Okay, so responding to the solicitation on the DIR website, which is dir.texas.gov, you're going to go, and this is the window that pops up after your account is created. You've already gone in, you followed the webinar, you looked through the Bitstamp guide that is on the DIR website under the vendor information for vendors section, and you've already set up your account and you've clicked on the login. This is the portal that shows up. So the first 3 buttons, the My Account, Open Solicitations, and My Response, are all the vendor information system buttons. The buttons below that, vendor information, about DIR, contact DIR, they take you back out to the main DIR web page. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on Open Solicitations after your account's created and enabled. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And this will take you to the page that has the list of all the RFOs that you're eligible to view. So any open RFO at that particular time will pop up in the list. You're going to look for this particular RFO, you're going to look for DIR-CPO-TMP-559. That's the solicitation number, and you will click on that. Next slide, please. And that'll take you to a page that has some information for you to kind of navigate around some of the RFO information. So the top part here is the, it'll give you the date posted, when the questions deadline is, the date and time, the date the responses are due, the date and time, and then vendor conference date, when the anticipated RFO answers to the questions, and then the when the evaluation date actually starts. The very bottom is the RFO questions. I'll go over that in just a little bit, but that is where your questions that your entity has submitted through the portal will, they'll post there in a list. It won't show all the questions that have been submitted for this RFO. Next slide, please. So you have the buttons there at the top, and I'm going to go over what those mean. The response to solicitation button is where you click to actually create the response. Once you've started that response, the next time you look at that button, it'll say view response. So a view response shows that you're already in progress. Create means you haven't started anything yet. So once you create your response and start loading information, that button actually changes to view response. View response allows you to resume your progress on any existing RFO response. Ask a question button that allows you to submit a question to be reviewed by DIR. Questions can be submitted up into the question submission deadline date indicated in the RFO document on the detail page. Subscribe to solicitation allows you to get notifications about that solicitation, such as addendum notifications, change in status on that solicitation. You must select the subscribe as to solicitation and have enabled your contact to receive notifications. So whenever you're setting up your overall account, you're able to add a certain number of users, and there is a little checkbox that you put receive notifications. Beside that, that checkbox has to be enabled on the point of contact that you've added to your account to receive the notifications. And then you also can subscribe to each individual RFO. So you may not want information on the other RFOs that we have posted. You just want to receive information on this one. So you don't have to have those 2 things enabled in order to receive the push notifications that we push out through the database system. View solicitation documents navigate you to the electronic state business daily for where the official posting and all documents and addendums for this RFO will be located. Next slide, please. Okay, this here is kind of like the cheat sheet, and a lot of people will print this out and use it because it actually gives you the instructions for what's going on your response page. So we'll walk through a little bit of what these are, but please, you will have access to these slides. And so once you have those slides, feel free to print this out, pin it, whatever you need to do so you can kind of get it as a quick reference during your uploading and submission portion. So the RFO response page buttons, please pay attention because there's two very important buttons here that change what you're doing here in this phase. So the delete button is actually a delete your entire submission button. And that's why it's kind of up at the top there. So if you hit delete, it is the same thing as you've never submitted that response to us. We can't see it. We can't go in and re-upload your information. Once you hit delete, you've taken your response out of the portal. So only do that if you're absolutely sure that you need to and want to delete everything that you've submitted up to that point. Once the response is submitted, then that button changes to withdraw. So delete, you have not submitted it yet, but you're wanting to delete everything you put in there. Withdraw is you've submitted your response to us and now you're coming and saying, oh, never mind, I really don't want to submit to this for whatever reason, and you withdraw your entire response. Again, we will not have access to it if you delete it or withdraw it. It will not be evaluated, scored. We have to have a submitted response. The next button is the submit button. That submits the response record and all associated information. So once you submit, if you forgot a document, you're not able to load it just in after the submit time. Okay, we're working on a fix to get it to where you can continue to edit up until the RFO closes date, but that is like in the works. It hasn't been rolled out yet. However, if you submit it, your response is submitted. So kind of think of it back like whenever you would have to bring responses into a physical location, into a building. So if you went and dropped off your response, that it's there. There's nothing that you're doing to add to that response, to take away from that response. It's in the file room. It's in the bid response room. That response is sitting in there. If you wanted to change something, you actually had to come and check it out and take it out and withdraw it and then resubmit it. It's the same concept. This is just the electronic version of it. The ask a question, we talked about that already. Those questions can be submitted up until the deadline date for question submission. And you can see the running log of the questions that your entity has submitted. The create a pricing form button, this creates the form where you need to go in and load your pricing information line by line in accordance with the instructions for pricing. So this particular RFO response does require you to submit the pricing form as an uploaded document and to go in and create the pricing form online using the vendor information system. The new RFO response documents, that's where you actually load all your documents. So everything that is an exhibit in the RFO requires you to load that into here so we can receive your response. If it requires a signature, it needs to have a signature on it prior to loading. And the vendor reference tab button allows you to send the vendor reference form directly from the VIS portal to your references by adding email addresses. It doesn't allow you to track whether or not they received it. It doesn't allow you to track whether or not they turned it back into DIR. All it is a quick way for you to send it out directly to your references. You can also just download the reference form from the Electronic State Business Daily and send it to your references by email. Next slide, please. Okay, mandatory submission contents. The respondent must provide these items listed below or the response will be rejected. Your Exhibit A, the vendor information form must be signed. The Exhibit A canceled contracts, attachments 1 and 2 if applicable. Your Exhibit B, the vendor history and experience form. The Exhibit C, contract marketing and support plan. Your Exhibit D, hub subcontracting plan. It must be signed. Exhibit E, respondent release of liability for reference. Exhibit F, the VATSR form, if applicable. The Exhibit G, the PDAA. And the Exhibit H, the itemized price list. Next slide, please. Other mandatory submission requirements include your manufacturer letters of authorization for any brands that you're proposing that you are not the manufacturer for, any software license agreements and or service agreements, if you want those to be considered as a part of any potential contract award, your Exhibit I, your EDGAR certification form, your Exhibit J, the VPAT form, Exhibit K, your vendor references. Those come directly from the references and not through the not from the vendor submitting the response. And any exceptions requested must be listed out on Exhibit A, or the affirmation statement that the respondent takes no exceptions. And you must submit the form for any addenda that are posted to the RFO. There'll be a form posted along with it to sign and acknowledge that you have are aware of the addenda that's been posted. Next slide, please. Okay, we're gonna take a break. It is 10:56. So what is that? 11:05-ish. To come back, please submit any questions that you have through the Q&A function on the webinar here, and we will address as many questions as possible within the next hour before noon. Please remember that any questions answered here today are unofficial until they're posted on the ESBD. After today, please submit any additional questions through the Bitstamp VIS portal. Actually, after this webinar, please submit any questions through the Bitstamp VIS portal in that questions tab.
Okay, it is 11:05, so let's go ahead and we will dig into some questions that y'all have entered into the question and answer panel. So first question, RFO DIR-CPO-TMP-559 document, page 10, item 2.7b states, and I quote, respondents claiming that a proposed product or family of products is exempt from accessibility requirements must specify the products as such in notes. So the question, when asked to complete a VPAT, our manufacturers tell us they are exempt because all accessibility features are provided by the operating system, Microsoft Windows. May we simply provide Microsoft VPATs to meet this requirement? And then as a follow-up question to that, manufacturers have no plans to add accessibility features since they are already in the Windows operating system. So in other words, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, therefore it doesn't make sense to disqualify a response based on that. So if DIR disagrees with submitting Microsoft Windows VPATs to meet the VPAT requirement, could you please explain that?
So the answer is it depends on what the product is. If the manufacturer has not tested their product in the Microsoft environment, they may not be able to fully be confident that their product is accessible. There may be features that an employee is having to use to configure something. So it really just depends on what the product is, and the manufacturer should be able to provide with confidence that the product is accessible. And also keep in mind it's state agencies and higher ed that are required to comply with the accessibility standards, and we'll be looking for accessible products.
Okay, thank you. Next question, just clarification, isn't Exhibit E for references and not related to canceled contracts?
Yes, it is for references, but it is also mandatory for canceled contracts. Exhibit E, this allows us to speak with those references if we have questions, specifically for canceled contracts.
Okay, next question. What if none of our products are non-COTS, which I believe is the requirement to complete the VADSR form?
Yes, the VADSR form is required for non-COTS products.
Okay, next question. We may need a little further clarification on this one, or unless we can make the answer work. For the difference between technology-based conferencing and telecommunications, traditional service provider audio conferencing bridge. Is that a question, Henry, or can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit more? In the question box, we can come back to that. Next question. We sent our references in last week. We sent them as a group package. Are you saying that our customers need to submit these directly and they are not accepted if we send them?
Correct. The references need to come from the references, not the respondent.
Okay, and then a follow-up to Henry's question, or web-based Zoom, WebEx Teams, no equipment, just usage or service-based. Maybe that's just a clarification.
Yeah, I think I can make what is being asked. This RFO is for products and related services, not for telecommunication services. So products like Zoom, WebEx, Teams, yes, will be considered, but as far as the airtime or services on that, minutes, monthly, whatnot, that's going to be under telecommunications. So Henry, if you would like, you can email that question to me directly, and I can post that answer on the ESBD more clearly.
Okay, next question. Is this RFO DIR-CPO-TMP-559 replacing contract DIR-TSO 3872.
This RFO is not replacing any current contract. If you were awarded a contract off of the previous RFO for technology-based recording and conferencing, a vendor's response to this RFO does not automatically guarantee an award will be made. So if you have a current contract, that does not specifically mean you're going to have a new contract resulting from this RFO.
Okay, next question. Is it mandatory to offer a discount?
No, it's not mandatory to offer a discount, but pricing is going to be evaluated based on the best overall discounts offered. And pricing is going to make up 45% of the weighted scale. So if you're not offering a discount or it's a very minimal discount, the chances of moving on to negotiation decline drastically at that point.
Okay, next question. DIR-CPO-TMP-559 Exhibit H pricing sheet template. Instruction tab item 2 states the discount being offered shall be based on the manufacturer's suggested retail price or MSRP. We frequently use bundled pricing with our own designated part numbers to represent hardware, software, services, and non-recurring fees. In other words, our designated part number may include several of the manufacturer's part numbers. We find this method reduces customer confusion when we provide our proposal. Is this type of pricing acceptable?
Yes, that pricing is acceptable, and we can address that if the respondent makes it through to the negotiation phase. Indicate that in your response, though, or your proposal, that that's the type of pricing being offered. That way we're aware. But yes, that is acceptable, and we do have means to conduct a cost comparison for those and review pricing based on that. But please indicate that in your response.
Okay, a couple of questions that kind of tie into each other. I see this call is being recorded. Can we get a copy of the recording of this call? And are you going to send the slides out to all attendees?
Yes, this is being recorded and it will be posted to YouTube. We will send out the link as well as the slides as part of an addendum posted on the ESBD that should be going up within the next few days.
Okay, next question. On Exhibit H, can we discount just manufacturer or all the products within a category at a manufacturer without breaking out individual parts?
Yes, as long as the category, subcategory, and MSRP, discount percentages are the same. Yes, you can do as one line item as opposed to breaking out thousands of line items.
Okay, next question. Does there happen to be a normal English rundown of the requirements for the DIR contract other than the legal version previously provided?
I'm not real certain of a normal layman version of it. The contract is standard for all of our co-op contracts. If you have questions and that need to be addressed, you can email them to me and we can get those clarified before your proposal. Or if you have questions following your proposal and during the evaluation and negotiation phase, you can address those with the procurement lead or the legal, and we can take that up from there.
Okay, next question. Are letters of authorization required from manufacturers? If so, do they need to be physically signed on corporate letterhead by a vice president or higher?
Yes. Letters of authorization are going to be required for any brand you are offering. They'll come from the manufacturer on their letterhead and should be signed by someone in their organization authorized to sign.
Okay, next question. Are all references expected to be from Texas only, or could some of them be from other states as well?
No, not from Texas only. We will accept references from other states.
Okay, next question. For letters of authorization from manufacturers, do we need to have a specific format? Where does this get attached when uploaded? any specific spot?
It will be an attachment as part of your proposal in the VIS system. You can just name it as letter of authorization, manufacturer name. It'll be just a separate attachment as part of your proposal.
Okay, next question. VPAT submission. Some of our manufacturers will have many VPATs. Can we provide the manufacturer's link to the entire list for these?
Yes.
Okay. Next question. Do you have any preference of the manufacturer or publisher?
No preferences, just as long as the manufacturer or publisher falls within the scope of the RFO.
Okay, next question. If our Exhibit H pricing sheet exceeds the 400 megabyte file size limit, would we be able to submit 2 Exhibit H pricing sheets, Part 1 and Part 2, in order to include all of the products we may propose from our equipment vendors?
Yes.
Okay, next question. Please explain the average vendor discount on the Exhibit H spreadsheet.
The average vendor discount is specific to DIR and the evaluation process. We'll take that into consideration whenever we're breaking down the weighted scale for the pricing submitted. The main one of focus for the proposal and the vendors, the respondents' information is going to be the DIR discount off of MSRP. That's a percentage that we're going to be looking at mostly when we're doing the evaluation.
Okay, next question. Are awardees going to be restricted by the line items we propose from our vendor partners, or are we able to offer any new products they may bring to market during the length of the contract?
That is something that would need to be addressed following award with the contract manager.
So can I add to that? So if you are proposing the entire brand and the manufacturer has new products that are within scope of the RFO, then yes, those could possibly be added to the contract later after post-award. If you do not propose it, however, it cannot be considered. So meaning that if you are not proposing a particular manufacturer, it will not be considered later unless it falls under emerging technology clause, which emerging technology means it didn't exist at the time that the RFO was released. And it falls within scope. So say you proposed brand A, you had brand B, but you did not propose brand B, you cannot add brand B later because it existed at the time of the RFO. Specific products under brand A that you did propose and were awarded may or may not be added to the contract post-award, if depending on whether or not they're within scope of what's awarded on the RFO.
Okay, next question. Please verify that each product must be line item listed. General discounts over a brand are not acceptable.
No, that's not necessary. It is preferred, but each product line does not have to be listed as far as SKU number, but we do need the manufacturer, category, subcategory, and MSRP discount that's being proposed. And if those change at all within a brand, we need a separate line item for that. And as long as the items fall within the scope of this RFO.
Okay, and yes, Henry, we did kind of address your follow-up as far as what's being offered as far as products and related services versus telecom in this proposal. I believe Doug gave a further explanation to you, and then offered if you have questions that you can email him directly. So I hope that answered your question. Okay, next question. With COVID-19 restrictions affecting travel and shipping consistently, will there be any opportunities to adjust pricing in regards to future product installations to a prospect after the bid has closed?
Yes, if pricing changes during the negotiation, we can address that at that time. If pricing changes after contract award, then that would need to be addressed with the contract manager.
Okay, next question. Exhibit H, please explain what is expected in column A category and column B subcategory.
So column A is going to be the type of product that it is. As far as category, what type of product it is it going to be an audit management product, so on and so forth. And the subcategory is, well, let me give a better explanation. The category is more or less the overall general description of that product, and then the subcategory is going to be the type of product it is. Is it used for server? Is it hardware, software? Is it SaaS? So on and so forth.
Okay, next question. Can we bid only certain sections of the RFO, or do we have to bid on the whole RFO?
I'm not certain what that's asking, but I believe what that question is do you need to bid the entire scope or certain sections of the scope? And no, you can bid certain sections of the scope. And if I didn't answer that properly, then you can email me that question directly with a little further clarification.
Okay, that's all the questions I see in the question and answer panel. So if anybody has any further questions, please feel free to enter them. Okay, Marissa, thank you for that clarification. That was correct. Thank you. Okay, Doug, that's all the questions that I see that have been answered and that we have addressed.
All right. I just want to remind everybody, questions answered today are unofficial until posted on the ESPD in the form of an addendum. I should have those up within the next few days, so keep monitoring the ESPD. Any changes or additional information regarding this RFO will also be posted as an addendum to the ESPD. But I want to remind you that it is the responsibility of vendors to monitor the ESPD and our website for any addendum, Q&A responses, as well as the YouTube link and addendum that comes out after this. This is just a reminder regarding the schedule. Today it was the pre-bid. You'll have a week from today until 5 p.m. to get in the deadline for your questions. Those must be received by September 8th at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. I will get the answers posted to those questions after that point as an addendum within the next few days following that, as quick as I can get them up. And then the deadline for submitting your RFO responses as well as the vendor references are September 28th at 2 p.m. And we will go into the evaluation pretty quick thereafter to start moving towards contract negotiations. And with that, that'll bring us to the close of our webinar. I want to thank everybody for attending. And as I mentioned, if you have any previous questions, any more questions, you can email me at doug.leach@dir.texas.gov. So thank y'all very much for attending.